all good.
Okay.
Yep.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Chitwood with Next Step Coaching Services. I'm the writing coach, and today I get to talk to my amazing partner, Amy Carroll, who is the founder of Next Step Coaching Services, and she is our speaking coach, and she is many things, including a speaker and an author of a new book. And that's what we're talking about today. Amy's new book, let me show you the beautiful cover, is called Exhale. And I'm going to talk about the subtitle in just a minute. But we're going to get started by just saying congratulations, Amy.
Oh, I'm so excited. You know, for a girl that swore I would never write another book after breaking up with Perfect, who knew I could be so excited about it?
I know. Every time I talk to you about it, you say, I'm so excited.
I am so excited. It's been so different, hasn't it, Melanie? Because you knew how much angst I had over my first book.
Yes.
And for those people that are listening, listen, I want to say to you, because I had a friend that finally said, when I complained and complained and complained about the first book, she finally looked at me one day and she goes, "Shut up."
No, she didn't.
She's like, I would like to write a book, and your complaining is really starting to get on my nerves.
Boy, that was a little slap of reality.
Yeah, but she was right. You know, I mean, I was grateful for the opportunity, but let's just say it was a really hard thing. And when I said I wasn't going to write a second book, I really meant it. It wasn't just like saying that to get everybody's attention.
I know.
But sometimes God is bossy with his ideas. And the idea for Exhale would not leave me alone. I had to.
Well, that's the first question I wanted to ask you is, where did this idea come from, and what does the title Exhale mean to you?
Well, the title, I mean, the idea came from the pain I saw in the women around me. So, you know, you and I, Melanie, are about women of a certain age. And,
so, I'll say it, 56.
And I'm 51. And so what I was starting to hear from the women around me was a lot of despair, that they were very, very busy and very, very tired, but they weren't sure that their lives made any difference at all. And that was a pain point that I had felt at some points in my life, but that I was no longer feeling. And I thought, so I feel like God has taught me and given me somewhat of a solution. What's the solution? And the way I first started saying it, this is, you know, for you that are listening that want to write, the original idea is rarely the finished product. But my original idea was I want to encourage women to stop spending their lives and start investing their lives. Mm. And some people, when I would say that to them, they'd light up. They knew exactly what I meant, that spending our lives is kind of doing just the next thing in front of us, the whole idea of the tyranny of the urgent taking over our lives. And instead be investing our lives in ways that are intentional and thoughtful and God honoring and God focused, because we know in our heads as Christian women that following God's call is going to be the best thing for all of us all the way around. But the way in the end that I ended up pitching it, Sherry and I ended up pitching it, was that we believe that Christian women have three main goals in their lives. Number one, they really would like to find a way to live a fulfilling life, a life that brought them joy. But number two, and these are in almost ascending order of priority. Number two, they want to serve their people well. They love their families, their neighbors, their coworkers. They want to serve them well. And most importantly, they want to glorify God. But most of us have settled for one or two of the three. And Sherry and I just believed that women could live a life that honored all three of those desires in our hearts.
I love hearing the genesis of that. I have flown through the book, and I can't wait to go back through it again. I know that the readers will love doing it on their own, or better yet, with a group. There's just so much rich information that can be shared in a group, a Bible study, or just over lunch with a friend. I'm taking this book to lunch with a friend today, and I'm going to read her some of the passages. When I started reading it, I really did take a big breath in and exhaled. So the title really resonates with me. And one of the things that I think is so interesting is that there are truths in this book, Amy, that you and I have been learning for most of our Christian lives. We've been Christians for a long time. And yet they're not cemented in us. And it's like we have to keep relearning and relearning and relearning these truths. And I hope this time, when I read this book again and when others read this book, that these biblical truths will really take hold and grow roots and be permanent in the reader. And the truths that I'm talking about are really spelled out in the subtitle. So let's talk about that subtitle. Lose who you're not, love who you are, live your one life well. I love the subtitle. It gives the structure of your book, but more importantly, the process that you want your reader to go through.
Well, and here's the beauty of this. So in all this angst of God giving me this idea and me telling God, no, remember, I'm not writing another book. But I kept thinking about the idea. And one day I was walking and kind of wrestling with God about this and kind of coming to the, yes, okay, I'm going to write this book. But I thought, okay, I'm going to have to quote Sherry Gregory on page 1 and page 2 and page 5 and page 9 and page 10. And the way I was like,
that's so cute.
Wait a minute.
Well, tell your readers how you and Sherry know each other so well.
Well, so we have been doing a podcast for 2 years, and well, now it's 3 years, but it was 2 years at that, maybe a year and a half at that point. So I have become a huge advocate. I could spider web all over the place on this, but because we're talking to some writers, I want to say I have become a huge advocate in collaborations and partnerships. My partnership with you, Melanie, is such a blessing to me.
Amen.
The partnership with Sherry has been an unexpressible blessing in that with the podcast, we literally process our lives with each other on that podcast.
Out loud.
Yeah, out loud. And you, Melanie, you know, I can talk. And so I was like, oh, wow. And so I texted her and I said, hey, I've got something I want to talk to you about. And she was so funny. She said later, she goes, I thought you were going to quit the podcast. I was like, oh, no. And
far from it.
Would you pray about maybe co-authoring with me? Well, Sherry's co-authored before with Kathy Lip, 2 books. And she goes, I don't have to pray about that. That's a yes.
Awesome.
So the subtitle is hers. And here's the beautiful thing, Melanie, that I want to share with the writers in the group is that so I was telling her about spending, investing, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, Amy, she said, you know, our audience is reforming perfectionists and people pleasers. Mm-hmm. If we tell them to stop spending their lives and start investing their lives, and we write a whole book about that, what they will do is they will add that to their list of things that they're already doing, and they will fail again. And she said,
I read that at the end of the book.
Isn't that awesome? And
yeah.
She said, it sounds like they need to walk through a process, something like lose who you're not, love who you are, live your one life well. And she said it like it just fell out of her mouth, you know?
Unbelievable.
And I was like, oh my God.
That's it.
That is so genius. But you know what? It was the structure of a book proposal she had written that had been soundly rejected.
Wow. That's a great nugget for our listeners.
Well, that's what I think, because don't give up. If you've got a great idea, something that you know is important, like lose who you're not, love who you are, live your one life well, you may be able to use it later in a different structure. And she didn't know when she got all those heartbreaking rejections that it was going to be the structure of a book she would write with me.
That's amazing.
Amazing. I love the story and I love how it's all come to life.
Yeah. So let me pull out a couple little quotes that I love. I could do this a lot, but on page 19 of the book, just getting started in the process, you say, the first step is a huge exhale, losing who you're not, releasing who you were never meant to be, letting go of what's weighing you down and holding you back. And that is where I took that big breath and just exhaled. And, you know, I think one of the biggest lies, even for church girls, Christian girls, maybe especially for Christian women, we believe we have to be a certain way. And I feel like this book is just a gift to the reader. And sometimes we need permission from somebody else not to be these things we thought we were supposed to be. And I feel like that's what this book does. It's a gift to the reader saying, you have permission to lay this down.
Thank you so much. And that was Sherry's original step. And here's the thing is that, I've wrestled all these years with expectations, and expectations come from lots of directions. There are cultural expectations, I think, especially placed on women. There are expectations coming from our churches. There are expectations coming from our families and our friends. But, for me, the heaviest expectations are the ones that I've created in my head. And what I think other people want me to be. Half the time, especially with my husband, and you know him, Melanie, he's so laid back.
Funny.
I'll think, so fun. And I'll think that he expected something of me. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, that's what perfectionists do, right?
And so exactly. And so the first step is so important, because those things that we are, that we shouldn't ever be, those clutter up our lives and keep us from being able to live our one lives well. I really have begun to see those expectations kind of as an episode of Hoarders, where our hearts and our minds start getting so cluttered and weighed down that we cannot live the life that we were created to live. So it is an essential first step to recognize those things and to let them go.
I love that. An episode of Hoarders. Yeah. You have, both you and Sherry have a great way with words, very unique. You have some great chapter titles. And I'm just going to name a few of them.
Okay.
Because they were funny, but they so captured the topic of that chapter. You're not responsible for the world, so roll the elephant off your chest. I think that resonated with me. You're not a country without borders, so draw healthy lines. You're not alone, so join the women flipping their flops.
Yep.
So every chapter starts off, there's 3 sections, and then every chapter in the first section starts off with this expectation, and then leads the reader to examine, is this God's expectation of you? You bring us to biblical truths. You bring us to stories about your own lives, often very vulnerable stories and honest stories. And then you ask the reader to reflect. And so every chapter is structured like that. Every chapter is just a very nice, manageable size. I really liked that.
Yeah, we
liked that.
Short. Yeah.
So I wanted to know if there was do you have a favorite chapter and a most challenging chapter?
Oh gosh. Well, I'll tell you, I'm gonna have to look at my book.
You gotta look at this.
Okay, let me tell you about my first, the challenging chapter first. So it was, let me look here. See, hey, listen, our listeners should know I'm usually a preparation girl. I like to have my questions ahead of time, but I told Melanie this time I don't want to, because
look at you.
And also I just thought I want you guys to get to the raw, real deal. So that's why I'm not quite prepared for this. But okay, so chapter 9. love your creator because your whole story has purpose. So in that chapter, well, let me tell you a little bit about my process. So I do this with speaking to, I always start with scripture first. And with Breaking Up with Perfect, God gave me a little break because I had to write Breaking Up with Perfect in 3 months. So the study
Which, a side note, is a very short amount of time.
It's nightmarish. Can I just be clear? Don't ever sign a contract like that. I would never do that again. I don't process like that. So anyway, God let me circumvent the process, but not this time. This time I literally had to study scripture for every chapter. Every time I had to write, Melanie, I'd think, and I'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to write. Oh my gosh. And I would get paralyzed and scared. And God would say, work the process. And so I would ask him the question that I always ask, and I do this with speaking to, where do I write from? So for this chapter, God told me the Canaanite woman and Jesus. For every one of my chapters, I think Sherry did a little bit different in a couple of chapters, but you'll notice that they're almost all around a person's interaction with Jesus.
Yep.
And so for all my chapters, that's what I felt a conviction to do. And that he brought to mind the Canaanite woman with Jesus. Well, I don't like that story because Jesus doesn't look so good in that story. He calls the woman a dog. Okay. So can we just say, I was like, I don't want to do that.
Not being nice.
What is up with that? But anyway, the more I studied, the more I loved the story. And, but to wrap up the chapter, I wrote like 3 or 4 different personal stories, and they were all lame and terrible. I could not finish that.
They just didn't feel right.
To save my life. And then one day it was like, Jesus tapped me on the shoulder and said, remember Jackie? Well, I mean, almost a year before I even wrote the book proposal, I had this thought, I need to talk to my friend Jackie. She's a friend, a high school friend of mine, but we've been friends since we were 4 years old. We met when we were 4. And Jackie has had a cancer in her jaw, and it's just been a brutal journey, And I had told Jackie, I really want to interview you. I think you're supposed to be in my next book. And then I had forgotten about it.
Wow.
And he brought her to my memory. And so that chapter wasn't supposed to have my story at the end. It was supposed to have Jackie.
Wow.
So you have to get the book and read Jackie's story. It's absolutely amazing. And Jackie has.
And you said I could write pages and pages about Jackie's story.
I could. It was so hard to narrow it down. But Jackie has allowed the trials of her life to train her. And she has turned gratitude into fortitude in her life. Those are a couple of my statements, that gratitude has become her strength. And she's trained people around her through it, like me.
Wow.
So that was the hardest one. One of my favorite ones to write, and it was a hard one to write too. It was the one about you're not a country without borders.
It's one of my favorites too.
It has a story about my youngest son in it.
Yes.
And it was.
I quote a little bit of it in the blog post because I loved it.
Okay. Well, and people are like, I've already used it in some of my speaking, and other mothers have responded, but not just mothers. Like I had some college students that made an application through it. So I was really excited about that. But I think it's a great chapter because it is a recent real life struggle. But I had to do it carefully because it involves my son, and it's not a really pretty story about my son. And so, but since he's on the other side of it, I asked his permission to write it. I told him I would let him read the chapter before I submitted it, and I would strip out, anything that he felt uncomfortable or dishonored by. And knowing that he was going to read it helped me write it in a way that honored him. Because at the end of the story, this story does have a good ending to it. Not every story does.
No.
But I was able to honor him in it. And I just love that he came through a hard situation and matured to the point that he wanted his story to help other people.
Yeah. That's cool. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites. I want to go back to something you said about where you start the writing process and the speaking process. On the Next Step Coaching Services website, we have some resources, three different ebooks that Amy has written about the speaking process. And she, in this resource, and what she just said, is that she always asks God, where do I speak from?
Mm-hmm.
And that is just a good reminder that writing and speaking are a prayerful, Holy Spirit led process. And I feel like as a Christian writer, we have to have a little fear and trembling when we go into the writing process and the speaking process in a good way of respect. And our desire is to glorify God. And I know that you didn't always use that process.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that it's transformed your writing and your speaking.
It really
So
has.
I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought that up.
I used to start with what do I write about,
Mm-hmm.
but after being part of a Bible study fellowship, actually for a couple of years, I started realizing, oh, I need to flip this to where do I speak from? So I asked God for a key passage, a focal passage of scripture to study, and it's changed my voice, which in really important ways, because I start as a learner. So I communicate as a learner instead of as an expert, like somebody here. And I have just found it changes the way our audiences connect with us.
Yes, you're coming alongside of somebody instead of speaking at somebody.
Yes.
And one of the ways you do that also is through, like I said, honest and vulnerable stories. And both you and Sherry do that so well. But there was one story toward the end. Let me find it, about the thorns. Do you remember that? Hang on. Let me get to it. I was like, wow, that was really honest. But I think, I needed, it challenged me. So hang on, I'm going to find it.
All right.
While I'm looking, if you want to say anything. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is the process of co-authoring.
Oh, okay, good. I was gonna.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Well, I'll tell you what. Okay, go ahead.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, this is on page 171 in the chapter Live in Animation.
Okay. Oh, yes. Now I know exactly what you're talking about.
Let's see.
This was an unexpected conviction while I was studying. I was like, oh, I don't like that.
Writing is such a learning process. But I could back up, but I'm going to try to find a little section that just really got to me. It comes out of the story from Mark 4:18 through 19 about sowing seeds. And the scripture says that some of the seeds are sown amongst the thorns. And you talk about your life at times being filled with thorns.
Yeah. And, that was a hard realization. And
it surprised me.
Well, I think it would surprise most of the people around me, because one of the things that perfectionists do is we become very good at facades. And because facades are what, perfection is impossible. So we create a perfect facade. And it also keeps people at arm's length. But if people were inside my head and my heart, they would know it was thorny. So one of the things that I had always thought about that parable until I studied it this time, that the only one that really survived was the one that fell on the good soil. But what I realized is, no, the ones that were choked by thorns, they didn't die. They were just puny, And so, and I thought there have been periods in my life when I have been puny, when I've been, when the cares of this world have choked out my spiritual life. Now, I was good at the facade. That's why you're surprised. So I was good at still presenting as if everything was all good. But inside, I know that there have been some times when I was spiritually puny, and that those thorns were choking out the life I could have been living.
Right. And that's really, that is toward the end of the book, and you've gone through taking off the things you weren't meant to be, putting on who you're supposed to be, and then living your life well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I like that part a lot. I could go on and on. Before we get into the co-authoring process, which I want you to talk about a little bit, what do you, who do you see reading this book? Who do you hope will read this book?
Mhm.
And what do you hope they'll walk away with?
Well, like I said, I started with I want women to stop spending their life and start investing their lives. That is not where we ended. Because
Hmm.
Rob Eager.
That, just so you know, that would have been a little overwhelming to me. And
Yeah.
our personalities are very different.
Well, it was really good because as I'm talking through this with people, I could see some people light up and I saw some people glaze over. So I was like, that's not it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that people like Lisa TerKeurst, Rob Eager, some others talk about is creating a book hook. And Rob has written about this extensively on startawildfire.com, I think it is. And so
Yep.
you could go in there but so we worked on a book hook. We kind of did it in backwards order and we struggled with it a lot. And I still don't know, maybe there's not a perfect book hook. I still don't know if we landed in the perfect place, but this is for women who are running on empty. I think that is true, that they're really running on empty, like fumes, and they got nothing left and they're still not sure that it matters anyway. And so that's who this book is for. And I just think the majority in our American culture, that's the majority of women, to be honest with you.
Right.
And then we say, so if you are ready to move from running on empty to spent and content is where we landed. I wanted to say happy tired. And our editor finally said, no, nobody wants to be tired.
Well,
I was like,
I do like spent and content.
Spent and content. What we were trying to get across, and I still think maybe we should have worked on it some more. But that's behind the scenes. Writer girls, start with that. Don't end with it. But what we're trying to get across is these reforming perfectionists and people pleasers, and we carefully did not use the word perfectionist in this book because it's a very unpopular word. But most of us really are, even if we won't admit it. But for that group, we're doers. So this book is really written for women who are doers. So laying in a hammock for a week sounds great. Laying in a hammock for a month sounds like torture. You know what I'm saying? So that's where happy tired.
That's good.
Describe is that feeling of laying in bed at the end of the night, and instead of laying there and agonizing over what hadn't got done the day before, what you know you're not going to be able to accomplish the next day, is to lay there and feel satisfied in your life. That you're tired, you know? But that's okay because you've been investing your lives in the right places. That's where
you said that very well. That's a great takeaway. Well, thank you for sharing about that. I want to just mention this before we move on. I really, whether you've done Bible studies for years and years and years, or whether this might be the first Bible study you ever do, it is something you're going to love. So I want you to tell readers where they can purchase it.
You can really purchase it anywhere that you buy books. And so there's some great deals going on now. And I'm afraid to put this on video because I don't know how long they'll last. But as of today, it's true. Proverbs 31 has it for $10, a hard copy of the book. What a great deal. And then also Amazon, a friend of mine told me this, so check it out if it's still good, is that they're selling the book for a little over $10, but then they offer you the Kindle version for $3.99 if you buy a hard copy of the book. So you can read your Kindle version and give a book to a friend. And one of the things that you mentioned, Melanie, is doing this in groups. And when Sherry and I first started this process, our heart's desire was to write a book that women can do in groups, because we believe so strongly that real, effective, and lasting change happens in the power of a group.
I agree.
And
community.
we have had a wrestling match with KDP that you would not be able to imagine. You know how amazing Chantel is, and Chantel can't even get it to work. But anyway, the study guide is up today, and the leader guide is up today. The group study guide will be up as soon as we can get KDP to cooperate.
So that look on Amazon.
Yes. So we have actually written books, companion books to go with Exhale.
Wow. Awesome. Yep. And the thing, I'm part of a very small group, just 4 of us women. And sometimes we have 2 hours to get together. Sometimes we might have 45 minutes to get together. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I like about the structure of this study is it's very adaptable to where you are, different spiritual levels, different time constraints. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a plus about that book. Okay, let's talk about the process of co-authoring, because in some ways to me it sounds like, oh, that would be so much fun, but then in other ways it sounds like it would be a challenge. So,
well, it is funny because for me it is a dream come true, and truthfully, like, I have an idea for another book, and I've already talked to a friend about co-authoring with me. It's not a Sherry book. Sherry has written 2 books since Exhale, Melanie.
Good Lord.
She has 2 more books coming out next year. I probably won't have another book for another 5 years. That's just the way
I don't know.
But I do have an idea, and I really, for me personally, I never have a desire to write a book on my own again. It suits me personally, and I think some of it is the difference between an extrovert and an introvert.
Some of it, yeah.
Some. And so I do know that co-authoring for me is like an answer to my angst about being a reluctant.
Well, let me just say, you're very hard on yourself about your writing, because your writing is beautiful.
Well, thank you. It brings up, Melanie knows, like, my speaking feels natural. The writing is such hard work for me, and I'm very insecure about it sometimes. So, but anyway, but for some people, I know co-authoring might be their worst nightmare. So, there are challenges to it. Yes, you are writing half a book. So that's great for me. I'm like, you get a book with half the writing. However, I would not say it is half the work. I think it's just as much work as writing by myself.
Interesting.
Because one of the compliments that you gave us, I think, Melanie, is that the book felt seamless.
Yeah.
And so we alternated chapters. Different people co-author different ways. We alternated chapters, but it's hard work to make your chapters dovetail when you've got 2 people, 2 sets of ideas, And so Sherry and I, like, this was during the hurricane last year. We were supposed to go to the beach and do this, but we were at Camp Carroll, and bless Mary Carroll's heart, 2 women with a lot of words.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so, but we sat in my office and we read our chapters out loud back and forth and gave each other feedback and stuff like that. So it's a lot. I would not say it's half the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just half the writing.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things about writing that is so hard is that you do it in isolation so much of the time. And I know that that's one of the reasons you founded Next Step Coaching Services. It's just, even me, who feels like more of a writer than a speaker, and you just want somebody to say, is this good? You just want to, you just want some kind of feedback before you put it out there in the world.
Yes.
So even though I'm an introvert and I love the writing process, I do need feedback. So I would think that part of the collaboration would help anybody, no matter what your personality type is.
I think that's really true. And Sherry and I have different strengths. Sherry is a woman with 10,000 good ideas, like, no joke. She just spews out good ideas.
An idea person.
Oh my God. And I'm just so happy if I have one good idea. But her function, she sparks my creativity. Listening to her, like, my brain starts pinging around and
Interesting.
becomes more creative interacting with her. My function in her life is I'm like, you cannot put 10,000 ideas. This is the one good idea. Run with it, you know?
That's good.
So we complement each other because we have different strengths. And if you are thinking about doing collaborative writing, my one huge piece of advice is this. My agent, Blythe Daniel, was very reluctant to have me co-author
Really?
because she's seen it go badly.
Yep.
Sherry and
I
I,
could see
we've
that.
had the best experience, but I think the reason why is that we had already worked together on the podcast.
Right.
So we had this kind of rhythm about the way we get things done. And just here's for example, Sherry had this book deadline June 1st, and she was really wrestling with the book. And I finally said, listen, she said, I think I need to get away. But she was reluctant because it was right at the time of our book launch. And I was able to say to her, go.
Wow.
Because Sherry has never once let me down.
Wow.
Never.
Wow.
I know she meets deadlines. She does what she says she's going to do. If I didn't have that experience with her and that confidence in her, I'd be like, no, you're not leaving town and going
Right.
outside of internet access during
Right.
our book launch. Are you crazy?
Right. And you might have been mad, bitter, resentful.
Yeah. But I just was like, I know Sherry will do everything she has to do anyway. You know, she about killed herself doing it, but yeah.
Well, I like that. I like, I think that you can know someone and have a great friendship and bounce ideas off each other really well and just connect really well. But I like that you said we've worked together.
We've worked
because
together.
I think I know you're great friends, but working together is a different environment.
It is different.
So I like that you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can have this great friend that you think you would really be great collaborating with. But if you haven't worked together, because I've worked with friends before and it's different.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't work out so well. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to think about, okay, what are the possible consequences if we collaborate, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So is there any last thing you want to say? This has been so much fun.
Well,
I live in Charlotte and Amy lives in Raleigh. So even though we work together, we don't get to see each other's faces that often. So
I know. I love this. We should do this more often.
Okay. But I just want to say, I love seeing I see the joy on your face because women, you've been in women's ministry for a long time, and that this is a book that is going to speak to them. I
do. And let me tell you how I know. Because I would not have said this with my last book, but I have such confidence and excitement about this book. And here's why. The last year of my life has been total chaos. So I chose to do a home renovation in the middle of writing a book. Who does that? So that was my choice. But then my youngest son graduated and got married. And so it was graduation, 2 weeks later, the wedding, 2 weeks later, the book launch. Y'all, just
that's crazy.
Nuts. But I said to Barry, and I think he agrees with me, he's the one who would know. I said, Barry, I know this book can make a difference in people's lives because it's made a difference in my life. You know, all the writers that are listening, that when you're writing, the message begins to be woven into who you are. It starts out here, and yes, there's an idea, and yes, there's some victories and some learning, but when you're writing it, it becomes part of who you are. And I have not had, that I can remember, one major meltdown in this year.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you, for anybody who knows me, that's a miracle. That right there. So I'm not bragging on me. That right there is
on the video. No.
It is, that's a work of Jesus right there. That is That is the power of
That's
God.
a lot of stress. And they were things that you didn't know about and you couldn't control.
That's exactly right. And so, so the fact that I have been able to exhale through the whole process of this book convinces me, the fact that I've seen it happen, and also that I know that it's built on the truth of scriptures. So this is not just random self-help stuff, y'all. It's rooted in the Bible, and that's why it's true stuff. So I know this book can change women's lives. I know it. And that is a great feeling. It's a great feeling. Yeah.
And I agree. And
So,
that's been fun. Thank you so much, friend.
thank you.
And congratulations to you and Sherry.
Thank you. Love you.